This is Isabel Georgios from the Tucson Hispanic Chamber. We are very pleased to have Lea Marquez Peterson join us this morning for our digital discussion this Thursday. Lea, welcome. We're so excited to have you. It's like old home week, so so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and it's so good to be here. I see so many familiar faces and names. I think that's Oscar on the call, and Marianne, and Letty, and Andrea. Esther, I think, is down there and on the list. And it's just fun to be here with you at the Tucson Hispanic Chamber and to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing and what is my role at the Arizona Corporation Commission. I realized since being appointed almost a year ago at this point by Governor Ducey to the Corporation Commission that most people have no idea what we do. So I'll kind of start there and explain what we're up to. This commission is a 5-person board and it's statewide. So I'm very honored to be the only commissioner that's not based in Maricopa County. And you might find it interesting that I'm the first Latina to serve in any statewide role in the history of Arizona, which has really been just such an honor. So interesting that it took to 2019 to have that kind of designation, but it is such an honor to serve in that way. So I've put some slides together to talk more about how families and small businesses can really, I guess, recover and survive or thrive during these tough, challenging times with COVID-19. I'm certainly hearing from people across the state in all 15 counties about furloughs and loss of revenue and small business impacts, and you know that just as well as I do. So I've put this presentation together to try and help families and businesses as they maneuver through this and recover. So I'll start, and then I'm happy to answer questions at the end as we go along, and I think I can control this screen. We'll see if this works. Let's see. Oops. Let's see, Isabel, if you could help me by putting it back in presentation mode. But I'm gonna talk through this while we go, unless I can do that. Let's see here. Okay, so hopefully you can still see the screen, but this is just data, and you're aware of this, but obviously small business operations have changed dramatically since COVID-19. This slide here on the left really shows unemployment claims that are filed and so on. But how does that relate to your energy use? And at the Arizona Corporation Commission, we regulate all the utilities that are private investor owned. And we'll talk more about that. But that means electricity, water, gas, and wastewater. We also do all the business incorporations for the state. We handle securities fraud. And we also handle railroad and pipeline safety. So there's a real breadth to what we're talking about on a daily basis and the different cases we're handling. We're kind of a judicial / legislative type body. And again, it's statewide. So I'm not just representing Southern Arizona, I'm representing all 15 counties. But we're really working hard to keep utility rates affordable, to hold our utilities accountable, and to streamline business operations for a lot of the businesses that are getting incorporated on a daily basis. This graph here on the right, though, shows as we monitor electricity usage during COVID. I don't know if you can see this, but it's February 2nd to April 5th on this slide. So it's a little dated, but dramatic decrease, obviously, in commercial electricity demand. And this is primarily because so many of the businesses were closed. Some of the large manufacturing businesses, especially up in the Phoenix area, were closed, and there were just, less demand at the commercial level and more demand at the residential level, which has started a whole bunch of other activity I've been working on related to broadband access that we can talk about a little later. Let's see if this moves forward for me. Oops, not quite, but you can see here at the Arizona Corporation Commission, we regulate all types of different companies. Certainly more people know us for APS, one of the big companies up in the Phoenix area, Tucson Electric Power, certainly in the Tucson market, Southwest Gas. What a lot of people don't realize, though, there we go, is that there are more than 1,500 water companies in the state. Most of those are run by municipalities, and we don't regulate those, but the private investor owned are more than 300. And a lot of those are very small water companies that are in primarily rural Arizona. I've worked with the communities of Morenci and Saurita and other communities that have small water companies that come in and talk about issues. So just again, very diverse, the number of companies we work with. So I know, and this is just a depiction of how challenging it's been for small business owners and for families as we've progressed through this COVID-19. What has it been, beginning of March, so 3.5 months or so that things have been closed or revenues have been off. Maybe your customer base disappeared or has changed. I know there's a lot of talk on the internet now about what's the new normal? How do we reconfigure our businesses? And that's certainly top of mind. So specific to energy, if the slide, I'll move forward here. Let's see here. If you could move the slide forward for me, Isabel, I'd appreciate it. Oh, there we go. There's a little button. So the best things that small businesses can do right now, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time paying those bills, is call your utility company. Now it sounds very simplistic, but immediately upon COVID-19, we had an emergency meeting with all of the different utility companies, talking hundreds and hundreds of CEOs on the phone with us as we did a big WebEx call, and had their commitment not to disconnect customers during this crisis, not to charge late fees, to set up payment plans. So there are resources available for families and small businesses. So the first and best advice I can give you is to contact your utility company and work something out. And you can see here that they're working with customers who perhaps miss payments or think that at this point they're not going to be able to make future payments in the short term. We do not want past due balances to become so large and so overwhelming that you have a hard time recovering from this after the crisis. There are also a number of programs available and additional funding. I know myself, I've done some advocacy for LIHEAP, which is a federal program that provides low income heating and electricity funding for families. And lots of groups have advocated for this. We got another $16 million into Arizona during COVID-19, and that's been very helpful. Move forward here. Let's see here. Hopefully I didn't skip a slide there, but there's also, oh, there we go. Their utility bill assistance program. So if you've ever looked at your electricity bill, and I know not everyone has, but there are budget billing where you can average the cost of your utilities over 12 months, and it's a flat rate. That may be easier for some folks at this point. I've had commitments from TEP and APS, the two big electric companies in the state, that people can switch during COVID-19 if they find it easier for them. So something to look at. Secondly, payment plans. So this is not a time to not make the payments because of the hardship and again, let this balloon. We really need to work out payment plans or delinquent balances. We had a moratorium last summer where people were not disconnected because of the heat of the summer. We can talk more about that, but there was certainly a lot of concern, especially in the Phoenix area where a woman had passed away in Sun City when her electricity had been shut off. So we had that moratorium and people started, the fall with owing money already and trying to work out payment plans. And you layer on top of that COVID-19, and we really just want this something that people are top of mind and working out how they're going to get caught up in the future. So their utility bill assistance programs. First off, hardship funds. So in Pima County, which I'm more familiar with because I live here in Tucson, you can go to the Pima County Community Action Center. And you can Google that, or you can go to wildfireaz.org. It shows all the action centers across the state. But there are hardship funds for low-income families, for those that have been laid off. They can help pay your utility bills and can provide you almost like a grant of sorts. And our utility companies have donated millions of dollars into these funds. So please, if you're having trouble or a family member or friend, refer them to the Pima County Community Action Center. And they're also up in the Phoenix area. There's small business assistance programs for APS customers. So if you have friends up in the Phoenix area, but I would certainly talk to your utility companies here in the Tucson area and Southern Arizona, because I think there are other options that they're looking at too. A couple different ways you can be paying your energy. Probably not something a lot of folks have talked about, but the flat rate I spoke about is that general basic plan. So you're not surprised you pay a flat rate every month. There's also something called time of use. So you pay more for energy when it's on peak and you pay less when it's off peak. I actually use this at my home here in Tucson. So I know we're not washing dishes or doing laundry from 3 to 7 because I use TEP as my electric company. And depending where you are in Southern Arizona or in the state, it could be different for you, but there are time of use plans that might be your most economic plan. And there are also plans with demand charges that you can talk to your utility company about. So a couple different ways for you to try and control some of that electric usage. I mean, what's today? I think it's supposed to be 108 or 110 or something like that. So I know this is a life or death situation with the heat of the summer, and it's usually your second most expensive family expense or even small business expense you have is your utility bill. So it's really important to study that. There are also ways to save by conserving. I'm sure you've all probably seen one of these Nest devices that you can see here on the screen. Just being really aware in your business or your home to turn off and unplug things that aren't essential, lights, electronics, appliances. If you're not in your office now and people are doing Zoom calls and so on, you know, make sure that things are unplugged back at the office in your business. You can use smart devices and have an app on your phone like this Nest so you can control what your employees or your families are doing in terms of the temperature. At home, running only full loads in your washer or dryer, your dishwasher. If you have a restaurant, you can try to control, you know, the ingress and egress, so the going in and out in your business. So especially right now at the heat of the summer. And then there are a lot of energy efficiency appliances that you can also talk to companies about and also to your utility companies. Other ideas for your business, and I won't read through all these, but just charging, if you use big electronics like electric forklifts and batteries, charging during off-peak hours, staggering the use of commercial appliances throughout the day, and creating signage for employees. I know even when formerly at the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, we always kept a sign next to our thermostat so people wouldn't come in and just crank it down to 60 or something and cost a lot of money to the chamber and probably overheat our HVAC system. So I think signage and communicating with your team is pretty important too. And that's what I prepared in terms of kind of how to save dollars on your energy. You can see here, this is my email address at the Corporation Commission. One of the first things I did in getting appointed by the governor was to open an office here in Tucson for commissioners. So you can meet with me downtown at the State Building, downtown Tucson, or also in downtown Phoenix, where we have an office just down the road from the governor's office. And beyond utilities, we certainly also impact business and corporation. So for any business owner on the phone, and I know there are a bunch right now, when you started your business, you came to the Arizona Corporation Commission to get incorporated. But I also realized, having worked with thousands of small businesses at the Hispanic Chamber, like Isabella's now, that from there you went on to the Secretary of State for your trade name. Then you went to the Department of Revenue for your tax documents. I mean, it's complicated. You have to kind of work your way through all these different agencies. So I'm working based on my experience at the Chamber and as a business owner in the past. How do we streamline this? How do we create a one-stop business portal to help businesses who are getting started and even renewing annual filings that they have to do? So that's certainly top of mind to me too. Since being appointed to the commission, I've stayed pretty engaged in Tucson. I still serve on the Pima County Workforce Investment Board. I'm president of NABO, the Women Business Owner Organization here in Greater Tucson at this time. And I chair the board of Carondelet, which is St. Mary's, St. Joseph's hospitals. So still staying very involved in the Tucson area. And that's important to me, to really just stay in touch with folks. And so they're aware of what, I'm aware of what their top concerns are. And I'll tell you from my perspective, what I'm hearing most from people around the state is just financial challenges. I'm sure that's the same as your family's getting together. You know, some might be safe and have employment still continuing, or perhaps their business was as impacted, but we all certainly have family members who've been furloughed, or their businesses, they're really in recreation mode now. What else can they do for their business? So I'm hearing a lot of that. I also am hearing a lot about broadband access. I mentioned that at the beginning. I realized early on, I mean, I grew up in Tucson, And I probably took it for granted that I have high-speed internet, that I can actually do this Zoom call with you right now. But you may not realize only 25% of rural Arizona has high-speed internet. So if you're further rural or even tribal communities, you can't operate like this. So if you're a kid, how did you do your homework at the end of March as we all went online? How do you apply for jobs? So I've been sitting on a statewide broadband emergency access task force since about the beginning of March, where we've pulled together a lot of the agencies, telecom companies, advocates, I'd call them, like Arizona Tech Council and others, to talk about how do we find funding and resources, donations of public Wi-Fi spots, whatever it takes. And we're working with the Department of Education, the library systems, some of the city managers, because we have a real need in Arizona. And that I think it's even been amplified for me in this role at the commission of kind of that divide between urban and rural in Arizona. We have some real needs in tribal and rural Arizona related to broadband. So that's a passion of mine and something I'm going to continue to work on as a commissioner in the state. But I'll stop there because I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, and I wanted to see if any questions came to mind.
Well, first off, once again, we thank you for joining us this morning. We're with Lea Marquez Peterson from the Arizona Corporation Commission and former president, CEO of Tucson Hispanic Chamber. So we're very pleased to have her join us, sharing incredible information. I think the biggest thing is what you talked about is in terms of reaching out to the community. We really appreciate that you continue to be engaged, not only with us, but throughout other organizations. So thank you for that. We'd like to see if there's any questions so far. I think we have, let's see here. Well, we check and see that. I have a question for you. You mentioned that you've been doing the studies on the broadband. What are some of the biggest, I mean, I hadn't even considered the fact of the shift. So what are some of the concerns or the impacts that there are to that in terms of how power is being used?
Yeah, I mean, specific to the broadband, do you think you need a fiber infrastructure? So even just basically you need lines that are taking that high-speed internet out to those communities? And you're talking millions and millions of dollars of investment to have that in different areas. There's a great map. I've put it on Facebook before, and maybe I'll shoot it to you, Isabel, so you can share it. But that shows you where the gaps in high-speed internet are throughout the state. And it's where you would guess. Some of the more poverty-stricken areas, some of the very more remote locations, I mean, certainly they have a tough time. But even within Pima County, we have gaps in service for high-speed internet. And I know actually in Pima County, the Pima Association of Governments, PAG, has been doing a good job at really trying to track that and work with CenturyLink and other providers. The challenge we've got though is certainly talking to business owners and families statewide. It's where's the economics and bringing it to a community? Where does it make sense? Interestingly, in our state, we have, I think there's 7 electric co-ops. If you've heard of that word co-ops, it's almost like a credit union. You're a member of a co-op. In our community here in Southern Arizona, Trico serves our area, or Mount Lemon and so on. Sulphur Springs serves like Southeast Arizona. But one of the co-ops called Mojave, up in Mojave County, actually worked with their members, and they're going to be bringing broadband fiber infrastructure to their communities, which is very innovative. So I think people are really trying to figure out a different way to reach different communities. You also want to realize in our role at the commission, we oversee 911 coverage. So when you pick up your cell phone or a landline, and not too many folks have landlines anymore, but you're dialing 911, that's working on the Wi-Fi network, right? Or the high-speed network. We need to ensure as a commission that that's working and that there's redundancy. If a line goes down, you've got another way to reach 911. Because just think how scary that is to think you're dialing and there's nobody there to answer. So we're dealing with that in a lot of different communities, that they lack redundancy throughout the state. But ultimately it comes down to, you know, where's the money, where's the resources to do this kind of expansion? At the federal level, there's some rural grants related to broadband. Governor Ducey's been a great champion of this, and he has set up a vice president of broadband named Jeff Sabatka, who is leading this effort, trying to find federal grants and resources. So I'm working with him on this task force. In the last state budget, Governor Ducey proposed $10 million in smart highway infrastructure, which is basically that, the fiber that would run up the highway in certain areas. Unfortunately, with all the COVID-19 crisis, that entire budget didn't get approved. As you probably recall, they ended very early and ran a skinny budget, they called it. So that's something we'll continue to advocate for. But I think there's just a lot of need. And I would tell you, for anything related to this broadband, the best resource we've got is really our library system. They've done an incredible job at opening up public Wi-Fi. So if you don't have high-speed internet at home, you can go to the parking lot at the library, and they've been trying to turn them on till late at night so people can sit in their cars, social distancing, and still have public Wi-Fi. As the school districts had that, but nobody was going to the school. So we were just trying to work on, different innovative solutions. It looks like Esther Marie has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, Leah, you kind of covered part of what I was asking about when you said the fact of the rural areas and others. It was very apparent when our schools went to the virtual that I know that there's amphitheater. You don't think of that as being rural at all, but yet they were like, we can give our kids computers, but we don't have they don't have internet where they're at, and they were extending out into the parking lots and other stuff like that. At the same time, I walk my neighborhood and they're putting in the G5 for the downtown area. I don't mind paying more. Why isn't there a fund saying, okay, so you're making money over here? These are multi-million-dollar companies showing great profits. Why isn't there a percentage that they have to do, like what they did with the casinos, where every dollar going in needs to be put towards providing services and those that are lacking?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Actually, what happened several years ago is the FTC at the federal level mandated that telecom companies provide a low income rate. So the challenges school districts have had is getting the word out. So please spread the word that for $9.95 a month, Cox and Comcast and these various companies will provide low income families with high-speed internet to their home. So it's really a matter of getting the word out. I know in the past I'd worked with Steve Holmes at Sunnyside School District. TUSD was certainly putting flyers in the kids' packets when you start school, just trying to explain to people. But when you're on a tight family budget, it's really kind of prioritizing what you need, and you need, obviously to pay that rent and probably your utilities, and then maybe food, and then broadband is further down that list. But the telecom companies have been subsidizing those rates through that fund, but there's certainly more that they could be doing.
And you reminded us
Could you put that out on the website where they can go?
Yeah, let me find the I'll find the link and send it to Isabel. Yeah. What were you saying, Isabel?
Next question. Our next question comes from Oscar Diaz.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there were two. Let's see here. First up, how effective do you think you have been at helping Southern Arizona to have a voice in the commission? And do the communication companies ever work together to create broadband infrastructure, or do they tend to work independently to try and capture their markets? If they don't work together, can the commission prompt them to do so?
Yeah, good questions, Oscar. And I'll tell you with the first question, I think it's been very important that I've brought a different perspective to the commission. If you have followed the commission at all, again, there are 5 board members. The other 4 are former state legislators. There's a former mayor and judge. So I'm the only one that's not been an elected official before, and I'm the only one not in Maricopa County. When I was placed in this position, appointed by Governor Ducey, May of 2019, one of the very first things on that first agenda was the community of Ajo. And I don't know how big a deal that was for my fellow commissioners. I was just getting to know them. But for me to read through the Ajo water case and realize that the community was being asked for like a 300% increase in rates for the capital investment that Freeport-McMoRan had made into that community, and just the rate shock, which I'd never heard that term before I was on the commission, but rate shock certainly made sense. So I immediately stood up for that. Chuck Huckleberry wrote letters, Sharon Bronson wrote letters to me and to other commissioners, and I made sure that I expressed my concern and voted no on that. Unfortunately, though, it only takes 3 votes, so it is something that passed. So I have continued to follow up with the community of Ajo to find out how is it going. They need additional assistance for especially a lot of the seniors that live in the Ajo community who are on fixed incomes. How are they going to handle that kind of increase? So I think I'm certainly paying attention throughout the state, but I think my focus and knowledge of Southern Arizona has been key. Whether it's working with, again, I mentioned Sahuarita or with the town of Morenci and so on. Tucson Electric Power is, you know, the 2nd largest electric company in our state. Another thing that I've been very proud to support is they have a process they go through where they're planning for 5 to 15 years out and kind of forecasting their energy needs. It's called the IRP process. This is the first time, which I was surprised, both TEP and APS have invited stakeholders to the table. So they've got lots of different groups and communities from SALC to Sierra Club to different folks sitting at the table giving them input. And I highly valued that. And I knew pretty much everybody that was on the TEP stakeholder group. And just keeping in mind, since especially living in Tucson, that there are a lot of things that the utilities are doing or improving that impact all of our residents in Southern Arizona, especially the Tucson market. And I'm probably hyper aware of that. I also noticed the commission passes a lot of rules that are statewide because we are kind of that judicial side too with rules. And I'm always the one bringing up the fact that we don't just regulate APS, which is the big one in Phoenix, but you know, how is this going to impact TP? How does this impact the electric co-ops? So I think I've certainly been a rural champion and certainly a Southern Arizona champion in this effort. Interestingly, though, as I've studied commissions across the country, not all of them are elected like we are, because I'm in election mode now as I'm running to keep my seat, as are there 2 other seats open. But other states get appointed, so that's interesting. I think we should be elected and be beholden to the voters. But in New Mexico, as an example, they elect their commissioners by district. So kind of like congressional districts. So every part of the state has a representative. Sounds like a neat idea to me. For us, we'd have to change our constitution to have something like that. Because at this point, I'm the only candidate and the only sitting commissioner from outside Maricopa County that's either on it or running. And we need people beyond Maricopa County to serve in these statewide roles. I think it's a no-brainer. We just aren't structured that way to get it done. And if you have followed the politics of any statewide office in the past, it's hard for people outside Maricopa County to win statewide seats. So I'm working really hard at it to make sure that I can continue to represent Southern Arizona, rural Arizona, as well as the entire state. And then your other question, Oscar, was around, how they work together for broadband infrastructure. What I find is that there's different types of telecom companies, some that provide the infrastructure, the fiber, primarily CenturyLink and a few others. And then there are the retail telecom companies that might be selling you your cell phone service or retail to your home or business. And they're very distinct, different types of companies. In terms of the infrastructure, which you specifically asked about, I think we're very dependent on the direction CenturyLink goes. There's not a lot of working together. There is, because they are the big player in that area, there are federal grants that are received called E-rate that can take high-speed internet from a point into the school districts or the libraries, and our state has been pursuing a lot of those grants, which typically CenturyLink wins those grants to do that work. The problem with that great program, though, is that it's only to school districts and libraries. So if you're a big employer nearby or businesses, you can't plug in because that's not part of the rules. So we have been working to see how do you take an E-rate program and expand that into homes or residential or business, since I already have the federal grant. So there's a lot of work that can be done there, Oscar, honestly. And I'm figuring out who the players are, who the stakeholders are, pushing where I can, because they aren't fully regulated like the electric companies with us. They are a hybrid where the FCC manages their pricing and like that part of it, and we are the infrastructure part of the regulation. So they're a little different than the maybe heavier hand we can have with a lot of the utility companies. Let's see, was there another question? Oh, just thanks. Okay. Any other questions I can answer for anybody? Oh, looks like Esther
We have
Marie.
another hand from, it's Esther Marie.
Yeah, I guess a lot of us are just harping on the internet, and maybe it is something that the state needs to take over. And I have a problem with CenturyLink with my nonprofit building where we were a dead zone. They were charging us $100 a month. We contacted them on basically a weekly basis. They came back to us and said, well, we can put a fiber line in for you for $1,200 a month. For a nonprofit in order to help people get GEDs. I mean, it's like pretty crazy. So I think that's one place that you really need to focus, and then maybe it does get more regulated like electricity and everything else to level this out. So I guess that was more of a statement than a question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. And as I hear from other groups that are like that, Esther Marie, one angle to go after is that E-rate program I mentioned at the federal level. If high speed's going to a school district or a library near, let's say, your nonprofit building, what would it take to allow you to connect? Right now, that's not allowed for the federal rule. The second piece is you mentioned 5G going down to downtown Tucson as an example. 5G still has points in which they're creating fiber, but then it's over air. It's like a Wi-Fi type connection at a much higher speed based on their new technology. That could be an option for different areas. I know I talked to a gentleman out in Prescott who happens to be in one of those dead zones between two different areas. And he's also trying to figure out if 5G would work. And that's the newest, latest piece. But it's challenging. I mean, our world has shifted quickly as of March 15th or whenever COVID-19 was officially here, and everything's being done online. So we had a call with all of the telecom companies, which again, we don't fully regulate. We have a portion of them that we regulate. And our question to them was, tell us about your capacity. Can you handle this if we are all online doing Zoom calls at the same time and going to school and running our businesses? And they said they were fine, they were prepared, and they were offering different kind of programs to different families and so on, which was very helpful, not disconnecting people, not charging late fees, the same kind of situation as our electric companies. But in that short-term Band-Aid, as we are going through this, we still have a long-term game to play. And I think having a state broadband office in the future is a direction our state should go. The very first step Governor Ducey took was with Jeff Sabatka, that VP of broadband I mentioned, and he's great, and he knows how this works, but he needs a lot more resources to be able to cover the entire state. So if you Google, he's through the Arizona Commerce Authority, and if you just kind of put the word broadband in, you can see some of his activities and actions that he's been doing. But thanks for the question.
Do we have any other questions? We're double checking here for you, Leah.
Okay, great.
Okay. Well, again, we are very pleased and excited to have Lea Marquez Peterson from the Arizona Corporation Commission join us this morning, having shared some really important information on resources that are available for our community. We appreciate the support, especially for Southern Arizona and the representation, Leah. So thank you for informing us a little bit more about that. Our mission here is to stay informed and connected, and we appreciate the opportunity to do that with you.